Eloane Fairchild's fingers trembled as she smoothed the faded ivory muslin over her hips for the third time that morning. The gown had once been her mother's pride, cut in the high-waisted empire style of 1807, its tiny embroidered rosebuds now threadbare ghosts along the hem. She had spent the night restitching a tear at the sleeve because Cressida deserved to walk into Lady Serafina Voss's grand assembly with at least one sister who looked respectable, or as respectable as a Fairchild could manage these days. Sunlight sliced through the narrow window of their Bloomsbury lodgings, catching dust motes that danced like tiny accusations. The room smelled of cooled tea, beeswax polish, and the faint bitterness of yesterday's ink. Eloane had been balancing the household books until dawn, because someone had to pretend the numbers could still add up to dignity. A soft knock. Cressida slipped inside without waiting, already radiant in pale primrose, her dark curls pinned with fresh ribbons that must have cost more than they could afford. "Eloane, you must come downstairs. Mama is fretting again, and if we don't leave soon the hack will charge us double." Eloane forced a smile. "One more pin for luck. You look like spring itself, Cress. No one will notice me beside you." "That's the problem," Cressida said, stepping closer to adjust the sprig of lavender tucked into Eloane's bodice. Her voice dropped. "They never do. But tonight they will have to. Lady Serafina invited us herself. Surely that's a sign the worst of the talk is dying down." Eloane didn't answer, because the worst of the talk never truly died. It only waited for fresh fuel. Their father had been dead 4 years, yet the echo of his name still carried the sting of cheated investors, seized estates, whispered forgeries. Eloane had been 24 when the bailiffs came. She had watched from the upstairs landing as men in black carried out the pianoforte, the silver, her mother's sapphire betrothal ring. She had not cried then. She had simply begun writing letters. Apologies, promises, pleas, because someone had to try to salvage what remained. Deep down she knew the truth. No letter could erase scandal. No gown could hide it. Yet here she was, pinning her hair with trembling hands, because Cressida still believed love was possible, and Eloane would walk through fire before letting that belief be snuffed out. Downstairs, their mother sat at the small parlor table, hands folded over a cup of weak tea that had long gone cold. The lines around her eyes had deepened since last season. "You will stay close to Cressida, won't you, my dear? And if anyone mentions your father—" "I know what to do, Mama." Eloane bent to kiss her cheek. The familiar scent of lavender water rose up, comforting and heartbreaking at once. "We smile. We nod. We leave before the waltzes begin." Cressida laughed, bright and unscarred. "You make it sound like a military campaign." "Perhaps it is," Eloane murmured. As they stepped into the street, the hackney waited, horse stamping impatiently. Eloane glanced back at the narrow house, its paint peeling, its curtains thin, and felt the familiar weight settle heavier. What would you do, she wondered silently, if every door you entered already knew your shame? Would you still walk through? The carriage rattled toward Mayfair. With every jolt, Eloane told herself tonight would be no different from the last 9 seasons. Invisible, safe, unremarkable. She had no idea how wrong she was. The Voss ballroom glittered like a jewel box someone had cruelly overfilled. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto polished floors. Silk gowns rustled like conspiracies. The air was thick with bergamot, hot wax, and the undercurrent of champagne and judgment. Eloane kept her chin level, her gloved hands clasped loosely, every lesson in composure drilled into her since girlhood. Cressida, beside her, glowed. Heads turned. Smiles flashed, genuine for the younger sister, calculating for the elder. Then Lady Serafina Voss swept forward, resplendent in ruby satin, diamonds flashing at her throat like tiny blades. Her smile never reached her eyes. "Miss Fairchild," she purred, inclining her head to Cressida first. "How delightful to see you out in society at last. And Miss Eloan." The pause was deliberate. A stiletto slipped between ribs. "How fortuitous you are both unpartnered this evening. We have a guest who seems equally solitary." 30 pairs of eyes followed Serafina's gesture. He stood near the terrace doors, tall and dark, evening clothes cut sharp enough to wound. Black hair swept back, jaw set like granite. The Duke of Dunmere, Alaric Sinclair, had arrived in London only weeks earlier, trailing rumors of Highland estates, wartime service, and a disinclination for the Tons games. No one had yet dared approach him. Serafina's voice carried sweet poison. "Your Grace, may I present Miss Eloan Fairchild? I believe you will find her conversation diverting." The room hushed. Eloan felt the heat climb her neck. This was no kindness. This was theater. Send the scandal-tainted spinster to embarrass herself before the most unapproachable man in the room. Let her stumble. Let him cut her. Let everyone laugh. She lifted her chin, curtsied perfectly, knees steady despite the tremor inside. "Your Grace, I fear Lady Serafina overestimates my ability to divert anyone." For a long heartbeat he said nothing. Then the corner of his mouth lifted, just enough to hint at amusement rather than disdain. "Miss Fairchild." His voice was low, edged with Scottish burr, like whiskey over stone. "I suspect Lady Serafina's estimations are rarely charitable. Please sit." He indicated the chair beside him. Eloan sat, aware of every gaze burning into her back. The scent of his coat, cedar, leather, distant smoke, brushed her senses. "You are not enjoying the evening," he observed quietly. She met his eyes, storm gray, piercing. "I rarely do, Your Grace, but one attends for family." A small nod toward Cressida, already surrounded by admirers. He followed her gaze. "A younger sister, the protector, then. Someone must be." The words escaped sharper than intended. She softened them. "Forgive me. I am unused to directness." "No forgiveness required." He leaned closer, voice dropping. "Directness is in short supply here. Tell me, Miss Fairchild, do all these gatherings feel like a battlefield to you?" The question caught her off guard. Honesty rose before caution could stop it. "Yes, because they are. One wrong step, one unguarded word, and the cannons fire." A ghost of a smile again. "Then perhaps we are both deserters tonight." They spoke, truly spoke, of books, of the changes sweeping Europe, of the quiet rebellion in choosing truth over platitudes. He listened. He challenged. He laughed low, rare, real. When he asked her to dance, the waltz already beginning, the room seemed to hold its breath. She placed her hand in his, warm, steady, dangerous. As they moved onto the floor, every eye followed. Eloan felt the shift inside her chest, something long frozen cracking open. But across the room, Lady Serafina watched, smile gone cold. And Eloan knew this moment of light would cost her dearly. The waltz carried them like a current neither could fight. Alaric's hand rested at the small of Eloan's back, propriety itself, yet the heat of his palm burned through silk and stays. She could feel the rhythm of his breathing, steady where hers fluttered like trapped wings. "They're staring," she murmured as they turned. "Let them." His thumb brushed the fabric at her waist. "Accidental? Deliberate? I have spent too many evenings being stared at for the wrong reasons. Tonight I choose the company." Her pulse stumbled. "You do not know me, Your Grace. I know you walked across this floor knowing you were sent as sport." His gray eyes held hers, unflinching. "I know you answered me with truth when everyone else offers silk-wrapped lies. That is more than most here can claim." Eloin swallowed. "Truth is a luxury I can ill afford." "Then spend it on me." A quiet challenge. They danced in silence for a turn, the music swelling around them like a shield. Then he spoke again, softer. "Why do you come, Miss Fairchild?" "Truly, because staying away hurts worse. Because watching Cressida dance while I sit in shadow is a different kind of death. Because once, long ago, I believed I might belong here." Instead she said, "For her." A nod toward Cressida, laughing in another gentleman's arms. "Someone must guard against fortune hunters, and sharper claws." Alaric's gaze darkened. Lady Seraphina's claws, perhaps. Eloin missed a step. He corrected smoothly, drawing her closer for the recovery. "She has never forgiven me," Eloin admitted. "A long-ago season. A shared suitor who preferred my conversation to her dowry. She has collected grievances since." "Then she is a fool." His voice dropped to a near whisper. "And I find myself grateful for her pettiness tonight." The music slowed. The final chord lingered. He did not release her hand immediately. Instead his thumb traced a slow arc across her knuckles. Once, deliberate. "May I call upon you tomorrow, Miss Fairchild?" Her breath caught. This could not be real. Dukes did not call on disgraced spinsters. This was a jest, a trap. Yet his eyes held no mockery, only steady intent. Across the room, Lady Seraphina's face had gone white. Eloin met his gaze. Heart hammering. Hope, treacherous, terrifying hope, rising despite every lesson she had learned. "Yes," she whispered. "You may." He bowed over her hand, lips brushing the air above her glove. Then he was gone, swallowed by the crowd, leaving only the echo of his touch and the certainty that tomorrow would change everything, or destroy it. What would you do if a duke asked to call after one dance, and you knew society would crucify you for saying yes? Share in the comments below. The next part awaits your thoughts. The knock came at precisely 11:30 the next morning, sharp, decisive, like the strike of a dueling pistol. Eloin froze mid-sentence, her quill hovering over the household ledger where she'd been adding figures that refused to balance. The parlor smelled of fresh ink and the faint chamomile from Mama's untouched tea tray. Cressida, perched on the window seat with a novel, looked up sharply. "It's him. It has to be. Don't be ridiculous." Eloin set the quill down carefully because her hands were suddenly unsteady. "Dukes do not call at such an hour in Bloomsbury. It's probably the butcher's boy with another bill." But the butler, old Mr. Graves, who had stayed with them through every reduction in circumstance, entered with a silver salver bearing a card edged in black. The crest was unmistakable, a rearing stag beneath a ducal coronet. "His Grace the Duke of Dunmere, miss." Mama's teacup rattled against its saucer. Cressida squeaked. Eloin felt the room tilt, just a little. "Show him in," she managed, because what else could she say? Alaric Sinclair entered like he owned the narrow hallway, yet he ducked his head slightly under the low lintel, as though the house itself demanded deference. His dark greatcoat was still dusted with the morning's mist. Beneath it, a bottle-green coat hugged shoulders that spoke of Highland rides rather than London drawing rooms. The scent of rain-soaked wool and cedar followed him. "Miss Fairchild." He bowed, perfectly correct, yet the gray eyes that met hers held yesterday's spark. "I hope the hour is not unforgivable." Eloan rose. Her knees felt like water. "Your Grace, not at all. Please sit." The small sofa creaked under his weight. He looked absurdly large against the faded chintz, yet he made no apology for it. Instead he glanced around the room, the patched wallpaper, the single good chair reserved for visitors, the modest fire, and something softened in his expression. "Your home has warmth," he said quietly. "More than many grander houses I've entered." Mama made a small sound, half gratitude, half disbelief. Cressida stared openly. Eloan felt heat rise to her cheeks because compliments in this house were rarer than guineas. "Tea, Your Grace?" Mama asked, recovering first. "If it is no trouble." He smiled, small, genuine, and Mama bustled out with Cressida in tow, leaving the door precisely ajar as propriety demanded. Silence stretched. Then Alaric leaned forward, elbows on knees. "I could not wait until the fashionable hour. After last night, I needed to know if I had misread you." Eloan met his gaze. "You have not. But you must understand. My family's name carries weight. The wrong kind. If you are seen here, I am seen. Simple. Final. And I choose where I am seen." Her heart stuttered, because no one had ever chosen her before, not since the scandal broke. Not her first suitor, who vanished the week the bailiffs arrived. Not the friends who crossed streets to avoid her. Yet here was a duke in her parlor, looking at her as though she were the only person in London worth seeing. "Tell me about the letters," he said suddenly. Eloan stiffened. "Lady Seraphina mentioned them? Not by name, but I know the shape of old wounds. Your father was reckless." The words came out raw. He gambled. He speculated. He wrote promises he could not keep. And in his last months, when his hands shook too badly to hold a pen, I wrote them for him. She swallowed. Optimistic letters. Hopeful letters. Never fraudulent. But hope looks like deceit when it fails. Alaric listened without interruption. When she finished, he said only, "Thank you for the truth." Then, before she could brace herself, he reached across the small space between them and covered her hand with his. Warm, steady. The touch lasted only a moment, long enough to sear, short enough to remain proper. "I would like to call again tomorrow," he said, "and the day after, if you will allow it." Eloan stared at their joined hands. Hope, dangerous, glittering hope, rose in her chest like a tide she could not hold back. "Yes," she whispered. When he left, the parlor felt colder, but the imprint of his palm lingered on hers like a promise. And outside, from across the street, Lady Seraphina's carriage rolled slowly past, watching. That evening, as dusk settled over Bloomsbury, a footman in Dunmere livery delivered a sealed packet. Eloan opened it in the dim parlor, Mama and Cressida hovering. Inside, a single sheet in Alaric's bold hand. "Miss Fairchild, tomorrow I ride north at first light. Urgent business at Dunmere. I will return within the fortnight. Know this, I meant every word today. Your courage, your honesty, they matter more than any title or ballroom. Wait for me, A." Her fingers traced the final initial. "Wait for me," Cressida squealed. Mama pressed a hand to her heart. But Eloan felt only dread, because folded beneath the note was a clipping from this morning's scandal sheet. The Duke of D seen driving the notorious Miss F. in Hyde Park. One wonders if His Grace is aware of the full extent of the Fairchild forgeries, or if he simply enjoys playing the gallant rescuer. Society awaits developments with bated breath. The words blurred, because now it was public, now it was real, and Lady Seraphina's hand was unmistakable in every vicious line. Eloan closed her eyes. What would you do if the man who saw your worth also risked everything for it? And the wolves were already circling. Tell me in the comments, because tomorrow the storm truly begins. The days without Alaric stretched like a taut wire across Eloan's chest. Each morning she woke expecting the sound of carriage wheels on the cobbled street below, only to hear the milk cart or the knife grinder's cry. Bloomsbury remained quiet, too quiet, while London society, she knew, buzzed with speculation. The scandal sheet clipping lay folded in her dressing table drawer like a venomous letter she could not bring herself to burn. Cressida tried to distract her. "He'll return soon," she said one afternoon as they walked arm in arm through the square gardens. The early roses were budding, pink and defiant against the gray sky. Dukes have duties, estates, but he wrote you himself. That means something. Eloan managed a smile. It means he is kind. Kindness is not the same as commitment. Yet every evening she reread his note, tracing the bold slope of his handwriting. Wait for me. The words felt heavier with each passing day, because waiting invited doubt. Doubt whispered that Seraphina Voss had already won, that the Tun's whispers would reach Dunmere before Alaric did, poisoning whatever fragile thing had begun between them. Mama watched her with worried eyes. "You have not been eating properly, my love, and you pace at night. I hear your footsteps." Eloan pressed a kiss to her mother's temple. "I am fine, truly." She was not fine. She was terrified, because if Alaric returned distant, if his gray eyes no longer held that steady warmth, she would have to admit she had let hope in after all these years of barring the door. And hope, once admitted, was the cruelest guest of all. On the 13th day, a letter arrived, not from Alaric, but from Lady Isabel Fraser, the elderly dowager who had once been a friend to Eloan's mother before the scandal drove wedges between old acquaintances. "My dear Miss Fairchild, I have heard the murmurs circulating. Pay them no mind. The young Duke is made of sterner stuff than most. If he has set his cap at you, society will either bend or break itself trying to stop him. Come to tea tomorrow. Bring your sister. We shall plot countermeasures over seed cake. IF." Eloan stared at the elegant script. Lady Isabel had not called in years. Yet here was an invitation, and a subtle declaration of alliance. Hope flickered again, small but stubborn. Lady Isabel's townhouse in Grosvenor Square smelled of lemon polish, old books, and the faint sweetness of heliotrope from the conservatory beyond the drawing-room doors. The dowager received them in a high-backed chair upholstered in faded gold damask, her silver hair dressed simply, her eyes sharp as ever beneath snowy brows. She waved away formalities the moment they were seated. "Sit, sit. No curtsying. My knees protest at the very thought these days." She rang for tea, then fixed Eloan with a look that missed nothing. "You have the look of someone waiting for the axe to fall. Understandable, given the recent literature." Cressida blushed. Eloan kept her chin level. "The scandal sheet was unkind, ma'am, but unkindness is not new." Lady Isabel snorted. Unkindness is the tongue's native tongue. What matters is who speaks it and why. She accepted a cup from the maid, sipped, then set it down with decision. Serafina Voss has hated your family since your debut season. Do you know why? Eloan hesitated. A shared suitor, Lord Hartley. He preferred my company to hers. Precisely. Lady Isabel leaned forward. But there is more. Hartley was Serafina's second choice. Her first, the one she truly wanted, was your father before he married your mother. When he chose Genevieve instead, Serafina never forgave either of them. The grudge has ripened over decades. Cressida gasped. Eloan felt the ground shift beneath her. My father and Lady Serafina? A youthful infatuation. Nothing came of it. But Serafina collects grievances the way some women collect porcelain. Your father's ruin gave her the perfect weapon. Now she sees Dunmere paying you attention and fears history repeating itself. Another man choosing a Fairchild over her circle. Eloan set her cup down untouched. Then this is not about me at all. Oh, it is now. Lady Isabel smiled thinly. You have become the symbol of everything she cannot control. And she will not stop until she has destroyed it, or until someone stops her. Silence fell, broken only by the tick of the mantel clock. Then Lady Isabel reached for a small bell pull. I have invited a few others tomorrow evening. A quiet dinner. Nothing ostentatious, but people who matter. People who are tired of Serafina's games. If Dunmere returns soon, he will find allies waiting. Eloan met the older woman's gaze. Why help us, ma'am? Because I was once young and scandal-tainted myself. Lady Isabel touched the cameo at her throat. A profile of a man long dead. And because no woman should have to fight alone. As they left, Cressida squeezed Eloan's arm. See? Not everyone hates us. Eloan nodded. But deep down she knew allies were welcome. But only Alaric's return could silence the fear that had taken root in her heart. The knock came at dusk on the 15th day, louder, more urgent than before. Eloan was in the parlor alone, mending a tear in Cressida's favorite shawl by candlelight. The flame flickered as Mr. Graves announced him. Alaric stepped in without waiting for ceremony. His greatcoat was mud-spattered, his boots still bearing the dust of the Great North Road. Rain glistened in his dark hair. He looked travel-worn, exhausted, and utterly determined. Eloan. He said her name like a vow. She rose so quickly the sewing basket tipped to the floor. You're back. I rode through the night. He crossed the room in 3 strides, stopping just short of touching her. The moment I read the scandal sheet, forwarded by my steward, I turned around. I should have come sooner. You had duties. Duties be damned. His voice cracked on the last word. I left you to face this alone. That ends now. She searched his face, the shadows under his eyes, the fierce light in them, and felt the wire in her chest finally snap. You read it, she whispered. You know what they say. I know what they lie. He took her hands then, cold from the ride yet warm where it mattered. They call you a fortune hunter, a deceiver. They say I am blind or besotted or both. His thumbs stroked across her knuckles. They are wrong on every count. Eloan felt tears prick. But your reputation, my reputation is mine to risk. He lifted her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to each glove. And I choose you. The words hung between them, simple, devastating. Then he drew her closer, forehead resting against hers. I have spent 15 days thinking of nothing but this moment. Of telling you that whatever storm Serafina brews next, we face it together. Aloan closed her eyes. His scent, rain, leather, cedar, wrapped around her like shelter. I am afraid, she admitted. So am I. His voice was rough. But I am more afraid of losing you to fear than of losing anything else to gossip. He pulled back just enough to meet her gaze. Tomorrow I will call formally on your mother on you, and I will make my intentions plain to anyone who will listen. Aloan swallowed. And if they still whisper? Then let them shout. A fierce smile curved his lips. I have a very loud voice when I need one. Behind them, the parlor door creaked. Cressida peeked in, eyes wide. Mama hovered behind her, hand at her throat. Alaric turned, still holding Aloan's hands. Lady Fairchild, Miss Cressida, forgive the intrusion, but I could not wait another hour. Mama's eyes filled. Cressida beamed. Aloan felt the room tilt again. Not with dread this time, but with something brighter, more terrifying. Hope, real, reckless, returned. And somewhere across London, Lady Serafina Voss was already planning her next move. What would you risk if the man you loved rode through the night to stand beside you, and the entire ton waited to tear you apart? Tell me in the comments, because in part 4, the real battle begins. Lady Isabel Fraser's dining room glowed like a secret kept from the rest of London. 18 candles burned in silver holders down the long mahogany table. The scent of roasted pheasant, red currant jelly, and aged claret drifted upward to mingle with the faint beeswax polish on the paneling. No footmen hovered. Isabel had dismissed them after the first course, declaring, "What we speak tonight is not for servants' ears or society's." Aloan sat to the dowager's right, Cressida beside her, both in their best remaining gowns. Aloan in deep amethyst silk she had not worn since before the scandal. Across from them, 2 quiet allies Isabel had summoned. Lord Gideon Ashford, a widowed baron in his 50s whose estates bordered Dunmere's northern marches, lifted his glass with a wry smile. To the Duke's good sense in choosing substance over simpering. Beside him sat Mrs. Eleanor Thorne, widow of a naval captain, sharp-tongued and sharper-eyed, known for hosting salons where poets and reformers mingled without regard for birth. She had once been Serafina Voss's friend, until Serafina tried to ruin her daughter's match over a petty slight. Eleanor had never forgiven. To courage, Eleanor corrected softly, her gaze on Aloan. Because it takes more than sense to stand against the ton when it bares its teeth. Aloan felt the weight of their regard. Not pity, not curiosity, but recognition. She lifted her own glass with steady fingers. To allies, I did not expect to find any. Isabel leaned forward. You have more than you know. Gideon here holds the original deeds to the investment scheme your father joined, the one Serafina's late brother quietly sabotaged. Eleanor has letters Serafina wrote boasting of how she helped matters along after your father's death. Lord Gideon nodded. I kept silent too long, thought it safer, but seeing Dunmere drive you openly in the park, it woke something. If a duke can choose honor over convention, perhaps an old baron can too. Aloan's throat tightened. You would risk Serafina's wrath for me? For justice, Gideon said simply. And because I liked your father. Foolish man, but honest. He never deserved what came after. The conversation turned to strategy, quiet, precise. Eleanor suggested a small gathering at her own house next week. Not a ball, a supper. intellectuals, reformers, a few sympathetic peers. Let them see you as you are, intelligent, composed, kind. Let Seraphina's poison look petty by comparison. Before Eloan could answer, the sound of carriage wheels on the square outside made every head turn. Isabel's butler appeared at the doorway. "His Grace the Duke of Dunmere, my lady. He insists it is urgent." Eloan's heart lurched into her throat. Alaric strode into the dining room still in riding clothes, boots mud-streaked, greatcoat damp from the night mist, hair tousled by wind. He looked like a man who had ridden hard and cared nothing for appearances. His eyes found Eloan first, held. Something fierce and unguarded flashed across his face before he mastered it. "Forgive the intrusion," he said to Isabel, bowing briefly. "I rode straight from Dunmere the moment I received your note." Isabel waved a hand. "No apologies. Sit. Eat. You look half-starved." He did not sit. Instead he crossed to Eloan's chair and went down on one knee. Right there, in front of witnesses, heedless of propriety. "Eloan." His voice was rough from the road. "I read every scandal sheet they sent north. Every lie. Every insinuation. And I realized something on that ride back." She could not breathe. "I realized I have spent my life avoiding entanglement, avoiding risk, because I thought it kept me safe. But safety without you is the coldest prison I have ever known." He reached into his coat and drew out a small velvet box. Opened it. Inside lay a sapphire ring, deep blue, flanked by tiny diamonds, like a piece of night sky captured in metal. "I cannot promise the Tun will ever forgive us. I cannot promise Seraphina will stop. But I can promise this. I love you. Not despite your past, because of who you became through it. Strong, honest, unbreakable." Tears blurred her vision. Around the table, silence. Then Cressida's soft gasp, Mama's muffled sob from the doorway where she had slipped in unnoticed. Alaric's voice dropped to a whisper meant only for her. "Marry me, Eloan. Not to save your reputation. Not to defy anyone. Marry me because I cannot imagine the rest of my life without you in it." Eloan looked down at the ring. At him, kneeling, travel-worn, utterly vulnerable in front of people who could spread this moment across London by breakfast. She lifted her left hand. "Yes." The word broke the silence like glass. Alaric slid the ring onto her finger. Cool metal, warm promise. Then he rose, drew her up with him, and kissed her. Slow, reverent, right there in front of everyone. When he drew back, his forehead rested against hers. "We announce it tomorrow. Formally. Let them come." Lord Gideon lifted his glass again. "To the future Duchess of Dunmere." Glasses clinked. Laughter soft, astonished, followed. But Eloan, looking over Alaric's shoulder, saw the footman slip a folded note onto the sideboard. A note sealed with crimson wax. Seraphina's color. They waited until the guests had gone. In Isabel's quiet library, lit only by the fire, Alaric broke the seal. The single sheet bore Seraphina's elegant, venomous hand. "Your Grace, how touching. A midnight proposal in a dowager's parlor. How very democratic. But know this, I hold letters in Miss Fairchild's own hand, letters promising returns that never came. Letters written after her father's supposed incapacity. Letters that could be read as complicity. Withdraw now quietly. Spare yourself and her the public humiliation of a trial for fraud, or I will publish them. Tomorrow's scandal sheets are already at the printer. S.V. Alaric's face hardened to stone. Eloan read over his shoulder. Her stomach dropped. "Those letters," she whispered. "They were dictated by Papa. I wrote what he told me to write." "I believe you." He folded the note with deliberate calm. "And tomorrow we prove it." He turned to her, eyes blazing. "She wants a war. She will have one." Eloan felt the ring heavy on her finger. Beautiful, terrifying. Because tomorrow the entire ton would know. Tomorrow Serafina would strike. And tomorrow she and Alaric would either stand together or fall together. What would you do if the man who just proposed to you was handed proof that could send you both into ruin, and the woman holding the proof was smiling as she lit the fuse? Tell me in the comments, because part 5 is where the storm finally be. Reeks. Morning arrived in London like a blade unsheathed. Eloan woke before dawn in the narrow Bloomsbury bedroom, the sapphire ring heavy on her finger. She had not slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Serafina's crimson seal, heard the printer's press already turning, imagined the fresh ink drying on fresh lies. By 8 o'clock the scandal sheet arrived, delivered not by a boy, but by Lady Isabel's own footman, who waited in the hall while Eloan tore the wrapper with shaking hands. The headline screamed in thick black type, "Duke of Dunmere ensnared by forger's daughter. Midnight proposal in Grosvenor Square. Desperation or deceit." Exclusive. Letters in Miss F.'s hand promise riches that never materialized. Is the Duke next victim of the Fairchild fraud? Below it, a detailed account, half truth, half venom. It named the dinner at Isabel's. It quoted a source close to the family, claiming Eloan had maneuvered the proposal through tears and manipulation. Worst of all, facsimiles of 2 letters, reproduced in cruel clarity. Eloan's own elegant script, dated after her father's illness had confined him to bed. Promises of dividends, assurances of recovery, words she had written at his dictation when his hand could no longer hold the pen. The article ended with a dagger. Readers must ask, is the Duke blinded by infatuation, or has the Fairchild charm, once so effective on investors, found a new mark? Society awaits His Grace's next move, or his inevitable retreat. Eloan let the paper fall. Her knees buckled. Cressida caught her before she hit the floor. Mama stood frozen in the doorway, face ashen. They printed them. They actually printed them. Eloan stared at the facsimiles. These are real letters, but they were never meant to deceive. Papa believed every word he told me to write. He was desperate. We all were. Cressida's voice cracked. What do we do? Eloan closed her eyes. The ring bit into her palm where she had clenched her fist. We wait, she said. Alaric said he would come this morning. He will have seen it by now. But waiting felt like drowning. Alaric arrived at 9:30. On horseback, alone, coat flapping open, face carved from granite. He did not knock. He strode straight into the parlor where Eloan sat with her mother and sister. The scandal sheet spread on the table like a dead thing. He saw the paper, saw their faces. Then he crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled Eloan into his arms. Fierce, unhesitating, heedless of propriety or witnesses. I am here, he said against her hair. I am here. She clung to him because if she let go she would shatter. He smelled of horse and rain and fury. When he finally released her, he turned to Mama and Cressida. Lady Fairchild, Miss Cressida, I apologize for the storm I have brought to your door. Mama shook her head. You did not bring it, Your Grace. She did. Alaric's jaw tightened. Then we end it. He drew a folded document from inside his coat. This arrived at my townhouse at first light, delivered by a clerk from the Court of Chancery. It is the original filing from your father's bankruptcy proceedings. Every investment, every letter, every receipt, nothing forged, nothing criminal, only bad judgment and worse luck. Aloan stared. How did you? My solicitor never stopped digging. When I returned north 2 weeks ago, I instructed him to pull every record still held in the public archives. Serafina's brother covered his tracks well, but not perfectly. There are discrepancies in the dates. The letters she printed were selectively edited. Whole passages omitted. Promises qualified in the originals that disappear in her version. He laid the document on the table. We can prove it. But the ton will not care about proof, Aloan whispered. They care about spectacle. Then we give them one. Alaric's eyes burned. Tonight, at Eleanor Thorne's supper, we go together. We show them the truth. And if Serafina dares attend, we confront her there. Publicly, finally. Cressida's eyes widened. You would risk open war? I already have. He took Aloan's hand, thumb stroking over the sapphire. Because I will not let her destroy the woman I love. Aloan looked into his face, fierce, certain, unafraid, and felt something inside her shift. Fear did not vanish, but courage rose to meet it. Eleanor Thorne's supper was never meant to be grand. A dozen guests, candlelight, conversation meant to be clever and quiet. By 9 o'clock the drawing room was packed. Word had spread like fire through dry grass. The scandal sheet had done its work too well. People came out of curiosity, out of loyalty to Eleanor, out of sheer morbid fascination. Even those who despised Serafina could not resist the spectacle. Aloan entered on Alaric's arm. Every head turned. She wore the amethyst silk again, because she had nothing finer, and the sapphire ring caught every flicker of candlelight. Her chin was high, her hand steady on his sleeve. But inside, her heart thundered. Alaric did not flinch. He met every stare, every whisper, with the calm of a man who had already chosen his battlefield. Lady Serafina arrived last. She swept in wearing black velvet slashed with scarlet, like a widow celebrating victory. Diamonds glittered at her throat. Her smile was a blade. She saw them. The room stilled. Serafina crossed the floor slowly, deliberately. Your Grace, Miss Fairchild, how brave of you to appear in public after this morning's revelations. Alaric's voice cut clean. Bravery is not required when one possesses the truth, Lady Serafina. He drew the chancery document from his coat and laid it on the nearest table. For anyone interested, the full record, unedited, unaltered. Murmurs rippled. Serafina's smile faltered for the first time. You think paper will erase what everyone now knows? I think proof will silence lies, Alaric replied. And I think your own brother's hand in sabotaging those investments will interest the Chancellor more than any edited letter ever could. The room inhaled. Serafina's color drained. You dare. I dare many things, Alaric said softly. When protecting the woman I intend to marry, he turned to Aloan, took both her hands, raised his voice just enough for every ear in the room. I asked Miss Aloan Fairchild to be my wife last night. She said yes. I will not withdraw that offer. I will not hide her. And I will not allow anyone, to tarnish her name without consequence. Silence. Then Lord Gideon stood. Here, here. Eleanor Thorne raised her glass. To the Duke and his Duchess. Glasses lifted slowly at first, then more. Not everyone joined, but enough did. Serafina stood alone in the center of the room, face white, hands clenched. She turned on her heel and left without another word. The door closed behind her. Aloan exhaled. For the first time in weeks, it felt like breathing. Alaric drew her close, whispered against her temple. It is not over, but tonight we won the first battle. She looked up at him. Tears shimmered. I love you. He smiled, slow, radiant, victorious. I know. And in that moment, with the ton watching and the storm still raging outside, Aloan Fairchild felt, for the first time in 10 years, truly seen, truly safe, truly loved. But across London, in a candlelit study, Serafina Voss sat alone, staring at a fresh sheet of paper, and began to write. What would you do if the woman who tried to destroy you walked out defeated? But you knew she was already planning something worse. Tell me in the comments, because in part 6 the darkest hour arrives. The victory at Eleanor Thorne's supper lasted exactly 36 hours. By the morning of the second day, the tide had turned again, not with a roar, but with the slow, insidious drip of new rumors. Aloan felt it the moment she stepped outside to collect the post. Neighbors who had begun to nod politely now averted their eyes. A delivery boy who used to chat lingered only long enough to drop the parcels and flee. Even the air in Bloomsbury seemed thicker, heavier, as though the city itself held its breath. Inside the parlor, Mama sat with a fresh scandal sheet. Another one, different printer, same venom. Duke of Dunmere defends fraudulent bride TOB. Allies bought? Witnesses questioned integrity of Chancery documents. Lady SV releases statement. I act only to protect an honorable man from ruin. Serafina had not retreated. She had regrouped. The article quoted anonymous sources close to the Voss family, claiming the Chancery records Alaric presented had been selectively interpreted, and that further evidence would soon emerge proving Aloan had knowingly continued fraudulent correspondence after her father's death. A single line cut deepest. One must wonder if love has blinded the Duke, or if Miss Fairchild's talents extend beyond the pen to persuasion of a more personal nature. Aloan folded the paper with deliberate care. Her hands did not shake this time. They were too cold. Cressida watched from the doorway. She's lying. We know she's lying. Yes, Aloan said quietly. But lies told often enough become truth to those who want to believe them. Mama rose, face pale but resolute. Alaric will come. He promised. He did come. Late that afternoon, carriage wheels grinding to a halt outside like a warning. He entered without removing his coat, face etched with exhaustion and something darker. Fury held tightly reined. They're questioning the documents, he said without preamble. My solicitor received notice this morning. A formal complaint lodged with the Lord Chancellor's office, demanding review of the records I presented. Serafina claims forgery on my part now. Aloan felt the floor shift beneath her. She's turning it against you. He raked a hand through his hair. And she's winning ground. Invitations I've held for years are being quietly withdrawn. My uncle, Lord Etienne, sent word this morning. If I persist, he will publicly distance himself from the Dunmere name. He controls half the estate's northern leases. If he pulls them, he did not finish. He did not need to. Aloan crossed to him, took his hands. They were cold too. Then let him pull them. Let them all turn away. You still have me. His eyes searched hers, raw, unguarded. I know, but I swore I would protect you. Instead, I've dragged you deeper into the mire. You did not drag me. She lifted her chin. I walked in with open eyes, and I would do it again. For a moment he simply looked at her, as though memorizing every line of her face. Then he pulled her against him, arms tight, chin resting atop her head. I love you, he said roughly. More than title, more than land, more than anything they can take. She pressed her cheek to his chest, listened to the steady thunder of his heart. But even as she held him, dread coiled tighter, because Serafina had not yet played her final card. The note arrived at dusk, delivered by a boy who vanished the moment Mr. Graves opened the door. Plain paper, no crest, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Miss Fairchild, £15,000. A bank draft already prepared. Leave London. Change your name if you must. Begin again, far from here. Spare the Duke further humiliation. Spare yourself the inevitable trial. Refuse, and the next letters published will not be edited. They will include your signature on documents even your father never saw. You have until midnight tomorrow. A friend. Eloan stared at the words until they blurred. £15,000. More money than the Fairchilds had seen in a decade. Enough to pay every lingering debt. Enough to send Cressida to a proper finishing school. Enough to let Mama live without counting every penny. Enough to buy silence. She folded the note once, twice, then walked to the small fire in the grate and dropped it into the flames. It curled black at the edges, then flared bright before crumbling to ash. Cressida found her there, staring into the dying glow. What was it? She asked softly. A way out, Eloan said. I burned it. Cressida's eyes filled. You could have. No, Eloan turned. Because if I take it, I prove every lie they've told. I prove I am what they say. And I will not give Serafina that victory. She looked at her sister. Young, hopeful, still believing the world could be kind. I will not leave Alaric. Not for money. Not for threats. Not for anything. Cressida hugged her fiercely. Then we fight. Eloan nodded. But inside, the fear had grown teeth. Because Serafina had just raised the stakes to impossible. That night, sleep refused to come. Eloan sat at her dressing table in the dark, the sapphire ring glinting faintly in the moonlight that slipped through the curtains. She turned it round and round on her finger, feeling the prongs, the weight, the promise. Downstairs, she heard Alaric arrive. Quiet footsteps, the low murmur of his voice speaking to Mama and Cressida. He had insisted on staying close tonight, sleeping in the small guest room rather than risk leaving her alone. She rose, slipped downstairs barefoot. He stood in the parlor doorway, coat discarded, sleeves rolled to the elbow, staring into the dying fire. He turned the moment she appeared, as though he had felt her before he heard her. Couldn't sleep either? He asked softly. She shook her head, crossed to him, let him pull her into his arms. They stood like that for a long time, simply holding each other, while the house settled around them. Then he spoke, voice rough. My uncle came to see me this afternoon, before I rode here. Eloan tensed. He offered me the same bargain Serafina offered you. Money, distance, a clean break. Alaric's arms tightened. I told him if he ever spoke your name again in that tone, I would cut him from every ledger, every lease, every family record. I told him the Dunmere name would survive without him, but I would not survive without you. Eloan felt tears slip down her cheeks. You should not have to choose. I already did. He tipped her chin up. The moment I knelt in Isabel's dining room. The moment I put this ring on your finger. He kissed her then. Slow, deep, desperate. As though he could pour every certainty he felt into her through that single touch. When he drew back, his eyes were wet too. But I am afraid, Eloan. Not of losing title or land. I am afraid of losing you to this, to the endless weight of their hatred. I am afraid you will wake one day and decide it is too much. That I am not worth the cost. She framed his face with her hands. Listen to me. You are worth everything. Every whisper, every lie, every lost invitation. Because you saw me when no one else would. Because you stayed when everyone else ran. Because you love me, not the idea of me, not the version they want to destroy, but me. She pressed her forehead to his. We may lose everything else, but we will not lose each other. He exhaled a shuddering breath. Then we fight on. Together, she whispered. They stood there until the fire burned to embers. But in the silence that followed, Eloan heard something else. Something colder. The sound of a carriage stopping outside. 2 in the morning. And she knew, deep in her bones, that Serafina's final blow was coming. What would you do if you stood in the arms of the man you loved, both of you tear-streaked and defiant, and heard the carriage of your greatest enemy arrive in the dead of night? Tell me in the comments, because in part 7 everything changes. The carriage door opened with a soft, deliberate click. Eloan and Alaric stepped apart, but did not let go of each other's hands. As a single figure descended into the moonlit street. Not Serafina. Lord Etienne Beaumont, Alaric's uncle, stood there in a black cloak, face pale and rigid under the brim of his hat. He looked older than his 60 years tonight, shoulders bowed as though carrying more than age. Alaric's grip tightened. Uncle, it is past 2 in the morning. Whatever this is, it can wait until daylight. It cannot. Etienne's voice was low, strained. Not when the Lord Chancellor's men may arrive at Dunmere by dawn. Eloan felt the air leave her lungs. Etienne climbed the steps without invitation. Mr. Graves appeared in the doorway, uncertain, but Alaric gave a small nod. The old butler stepped aside. Inside the parlor, the fire had burned to red embers. Etienne refused a chair. He stood stiffly, gloved hands clasped behind his back. I have come to make you one final offer, he said. Withdraw the engagement. Publicly. Tonight. Issue a statement, regret, youthful indiscretion, whatever words you choose. Do this, and I will withdraw my complaint to the Chancellor. The leases remain yours. The northern estates stay intact. Serafina will burn her letters. The matter ends quietly. Alaric laughed, short, bitter. You rode through the night to bribe me with my own inheritance? To save it, Etienne snapped. And to save you from yourself. You think you can marry this woman and keep Dunmere? The Tun will close ranks. Creditors will circle. Tenants will grow restless when rents go unpaid because trade dries up. You will lose everything your father, your grandfather, built. Eloan felt Alaric's hand tremble once, then steady. I will lose nothing that matters, he said quietly. And I will not sell Eloan to keep a title that has brought my family only isolation and cold duty. Etienne's gaze flicked to her, cold, assessing. Miss Fairchild, you are clever. More clever than most give you credit for. Surely you see the arithmetic here. £15,000 from Serafina. The estate preserved from my uncle's hand. A life without whispers. You could protect your sister, your mother, even him. A nod toward Alaric. From ruin, Eloan met his eyes without flinching. I could, but I will not buy peace with my soul. Etienne exhaled, a sound like wind through dead leaves. Then you are both fools. He turned toward the door. Alaric spoke one last time. Uncle, if you walk out that door tonight, if you side with Serafina against your own blood, there will be no reconciliation. Ever. Etienne paused. His shoulders sagged, just for a heartbeat. Then he left. The door closed softly. In the silence that followed, Eloan turned to Alaric. He will do it, she whispered. He will go to the Chancellor. He will help her. Alaric pulled her close again. Then we move first. Dawn found them in the small study at the back of the townhouse. Papers spread across the table, ink still wet on fresh letters. Alaric had sent for his solicitor at first light. The man arrived rumpled but alert, carrying a satchel of documents. They worked quickly. A formal announcement of the engagement, written in Alaric's own hand, to be delivered to every major paper by noon. A second letter to the Lord Chancellor himself, requesting an immediate audience to present the full, unredacted Chancery records and counter Serafina's complaint. A third to Lord Etienne, short, final. You have made your choice. I have made mine. Dunmere endures, with or without you. Eloan wrote her own letter, to Cressida and Mama, who slept upstairs unaware. If this goes wrong, if the Chancellor sides against us, if the Tun closes every door, I want you both to know I would choose this again. I choose him. I choose love over safety. Forgive me if the storm touches you. She sealed it, pressed the sapphire ring into the wax as her mark. Alaric watched her. You do not have to do this. I know. She met his gaze. But I want to. He took the letter from her fingers, set it aside, then cupped her face in both hands. Whatever happens today, whatever they throw at us, I need you to remember one thing. She waited. You are not your father's mistakes. You are not Serafina's grudge. You are Eloan Fairchild. Brave. Brilliant. The woman who walked into a ballroom knowing she would be mocked, and still held her head high. The woman who taught me what love actually costs, and that it is worth every penny. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She did not wipe them away. I love you, she said, no matter what the Chancellor decides, no matter what the papers print tomorrow. He kissed her, slow, fierce, a vow pressed against her lips. Then he straightened. We go to the Chancellor. Tog. Ether. The Lord Chancellor's office in Westminster smelled of old vellum, sealing wax, and authority. They were admitted at once. Alaric's ducal rank, combined with the urgency of the complaint, ensured no delay. The Chancellor, an austere man in his 70s named Lord Warrington, sat behind a vast desk piled with ledgers. He looked up as they entered, gaze shrewd. Your Grace, Miss Fairchild, I expected you sooner. Alaric laid the full Chancery packet on the desk. Because someone has accused my solicitor and by extension me of forgery to protect a fraudulent match. I bring the originals, unedited, complete. Warrington opened the packet, scanned pages. His brows rose. These differ from the facsimiles circulated yesterday. They do, Alaric said. Lady Serafina Voss has selectively presented evidence to damage Miss Fairchild's reputation and mine. I ask for a formal review. Immediate. Public if necessary. Warrington looked at Eloan. Miss Fairchild, You understand that if these letters are genuine, and if they show complicity, they show duty, she said steadily. I wrote what my dying father instructed. I believed him. I was wrong, but not dishonest. Warrington studied her for a long moment. Then he closed the packet. I will summon Lady Voss and her brother's estate executors. This will be examined thoroughly. But know this, if I find evidence of deliberate deception on her part, the consequences will be severe. Perjury before Chancery is no small matter. Alaric inclined his head. We ask only for the truth. Warrington's gaze softened just a fraction. Truth is rare in this city, but it still has weight. He rang a bell. You will have my decision within the week. Until then, keep your heads high. Rumors die faster when ignored. They left the office side by side. Outside, in the pale winter light, Alaric stopped. Turned to her. This is the turning point, he said quietly. We have done everything we can. Now we wait. Aloan slipped her hand into his. Then we wait together. Across the city, in a silent townhouse, Serafina Voss received a summons. Her hand shook as she read it. For the first time in years, fear touched her eyes. And somewhere deep inside Aloan, a small, stubborn flame burned brighter, because the tide, slowly, painfully, was beginning to turn. What would you feel if you walked out of the highest court in the land knowing the truth was finally on trial, and your enemy had just been summoned to answer for her lies? Share in the comments, because in Part 8 the final confrontation arrives. The Lord Chancellor's formal hearing was set for 3 days later, in the oak-paneled chamber of the Chancery Court. Doors closed to the public but not to witnesses. Word leaked anyway. By noon on the appointed day, a crowd had gathered outside the Westminster Hall. Reporters, idlers, society matrons in veiled bonnets, gentlemen pretending to read newspapers while straining to hear. The air smelled of coal smoke, river damp, and anticipation sharp as a blade. Inside, the chamber was smaller than Aloan expected, intimate, almost suffocating. A long table, high-backed chairs, candles burning despite the daylight because the tall windows were narrow and leaded. Lord Warrington presided, flanked by 2 clerks. Alaric sat to his right, Aloan beside him. Back straight, hands folded in her lap to hide the faint tremble. Across the table, Serafina Voss in unrelieved black, diamonds replaced by jet, face composed but eyes glittering with something close to panic. Beside her, 2 solicitors in somber coats and a pale-faced man Aloan recognized as the executor of Serafina's late brother's estate. Warrington wasted no time. Lady Voss, you have lodged a complaint alleging forgery of Chancery records by the Duke of Dunmere or his agents, and you have circulated facsimiles of letters purportedly written by Miss Fairchild suggesting complicity in fraud. You will now present your evidence. Serafina rose, graceful, practiced. She laid a thin sheaf of papers on the table. These are the original letters, she said smoothly. Miss Fairchild's hand, dated after Viscount Fairchild's illness rendered him incapable. They promise specific returns on investments already known to be insolvent. They bear her signature alone. She slid them forward. Aloan felt Alaric tense beside her. Warrington scanned the pages, frowned. These appear consistent with the facsimiles already in circulation. They are, Serafina said. And they prove nothing yet, Warrington interrupted. He nodded to his clerk. Bring the originals from the archive. A heavy ledger was carried in, bound in red morocco, pages yellowed but intact. The clerk opened it, turned to the marked place. Silence stretched. Then Warrington looked up. These originals contain additional paragraphs. qualifying statements, references to ongoing correspondence with trustees, none of which appear in Lady Voss's copies. Serafina's composure cracked, just a hairline fracture. An oversight, she said quickly. The important passages are the ones you omitted, Alaric finished, voice like steel. The ones that show these were hopeful projections, not guarantees. The ones that prove no intent to deceive. Warrington closed the ledger. Lady Voss, explain the discrepancies. Serafina's lips thinned. My brother's records were incomplete after his death. You relied on selective presentation, Warrington said coldly, and on the circulation of incomplete evidence to damage the reputation of Miss Fairchild and, by extension, the Duke. He turned to the executor. You have seen the full archive? The man swallowed. Yes, my lord. The missing passages were in the brothers' private files. Lady Voss had access. Serafina's hands clenched in her lap. Warrington leaned forward. Lady Voss, you are on the edge of perjury. If I find you knowingly presented false or incomplete evidence to this court, or to the public in a manner calculated to deceive, I will refer the matter to the Attorney General. The room held its breath. Serafina stared at the table. Then quietly, bitterly, she spoke. I acted to protect the Duke from an unsuitable match. You acted to settle a private grudge, Alaric said, voice low but carrying. A grudge against a family that never wronged you, except by existing. Warrington raised a hand. Enough. He looked at Eloan. Miss Fairchild, do you have anything to add? She rose slowly, met every eye in the room. I wrote those letters because my father asked me to. He was dying. He truly believed the investments would recover. I believed him. I was wrong, but I was never dishonest. She looked directly at Serafina. I have carried the weight of my father's mistakes for 10 years. I have borne the whispers, the turned backs, the closed doors. I have protected my sister and my mother as best I could. I never asked for forgiveness. I only asked to be seen as I am, not as a scandal, but as a woman who tried to do right in impossible circumstances. Her voice never wavered. I love the Duke of Dunmere, not his title, not his wealth, him. And if society cannot accept that, then society must change or lose us both. Silence. Then Warrington spoke. The complaint against the Duke is dismissed. The evidence presented by Lady Voss is deemed incomplete and misleading. I will issue a public clarification to that effect. He turned to Serafina. Lady Voss, you will cease all further circulation of these letters. Any further action of this nature will be treated as contempt. Do you understand? Serafina's jaw worked. Then, barely audible, Yes, my lord. Warrington nodded once. This hearing is concluded. They stepped out into the pale winter sun. The crowd outside had grown. Whispers raced ahead of them. Reporters scribbling furiously. Matrons exchanging glances. Gentlemen tipping hats in sudden respect. Alaric offered Eloan his arm. She took it. They walked through the throng. Heads high, pace unhurried. No one jeered. A few even smiled. At the carriage, Alaric stopped, turned to her. You were magnificent, he said softly. So were you. She touched his cheek. But it is not over. No, he agreed. But the worst is past. Behind them, Serafina emerged, alone. No cronies flanked her now. No triumphant smile. She looked smaller in the daylight. She met Eloan's eyes across the pavement. For a moment neither moved. Then Serafina inclined her head. Not a curtsy, but acknowledgement. She turned, walked away, alone. That evening, In the quiet of the Bloomsbury parlor, Alaric knelt again. This time no witnesses, no fanfare, just them. He took both her hands. I asked you once in a crowded room. I ask you again, here now with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. Eloan's throat tightened. Marry me, Eloan. Not because the court cleared your name. Not because the Tun is watching. Marry me because I cannot breathe properly when you are not beside me. Because every future I imagine has you in it. Because I love you. Fiercely, completely, irrevocably. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She sank to her knees in front of him so they were eye to eye equal. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. He kissed her. Slow, deep, triumphant. When they broke apart, foreheads pressed together, he laughed. A sound of pure relief. We did it, he said. We survived them. We did more than survive, she answered. We won. Outside, the city continued its restless hum. Inside, 2 hearts beat in quiet victory. And for the first time in 10 years, Eloan Fairchild felt the weight lift. Not gone, but light enough to carry. Together. What does victory taste like when you fought not just for love, but for the right to be seen as whole? Tell me in the comments. Because in part 9 we see the dawn after the storm. The great library at Dunmere had become Eloan's sanctuary and the children's favorite battleground. Sunlight streamed through tall windows onto shelves that climbed 2 stories high. A fire crackled in the massive hearth even in late spring. Books lay open on tables. Maps unrolled across the carpet. 4-year-old Rowan Sinclair, dark-haired, gray-eyed, every inch his father, rode a hobby horse made from a broom handle, charging between armchairs while shouting battle cries. 2-year-old Isla, fair like her Aunt Cressida, sat in Eloan's lap at the window seat, turning pages of a picture book with fierce concentration. Alaric entered quietly, coat still on from riding the estate bounds. He paused in the doorway, watching. Eloan looked up, smiled. You're home early. Couldn't stay away. He crossed to them, bent to kiss Rowan's head, earning an indignant "Papa, I'm conquering." Then kissed Isla's curls, then, slowly, deliberately, kissed Eloan. The children giggled. Later, after nursery tea and stories, they walked the upper gallery alone. The castle had changed in 5 years. The cold, echoing halls were warmer now. Rugs laid, fires lit, laughter echoing where silence once reigned. Tenants spoke Alaric's name with respect instead of caution. The northern estates thrived under his steady hand, and Eloan's quiet reforms. Village schools, lending libraries, fair rents. Society had not fully embraced them. Some doors remained closed, but others had opened slowly, grudgingly. Invitations arrived from those who valued character over gossip. Lady Isabel visited every summer. Eleanor Thorne sent books and sharp-witted letters. Even Lord Gideon had taken to calling Alaric nephew in jest. Seraphina Voss had faded. After the Chancery ruling, her influence withered. She lived quietly in the country now. Alone, bitter, a cautionary tale whispered at balls she no longer attended. Eloan leaned against the stone balustrade, looking out over the moors. Alaric stood behind her, arms around her waist, chin on her shoulder. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "The doors that closed, the battles we fought." He pressed a kiss to the side of her neck. "Never. I regret the years before you when I thought duty was enough, when I thought solitude was strength." She turned in his arms. "And now I know strength is this." He touched her cheek. "Choosing love every day, even when it costs, even when it hurts, especially then." She smiled, slow, radiant. "I love you, Alaric Sinclair. I love you, Eloan Dunmere." He grinned. "Duchess, wife, mother, warrior, my heart." They stood there until the sun dipped low, painting the moors gold. Inside the nursery down the hall, Rowan and Isla slept, safe, loved, growing up in a home where truth had won. And somewhere in the quiet, Eloan felt the last shadow lift. Not because the world had changed completely, but because she had changed enough to no longer need its approval.